Okay, in this talk things about fractions. So I'm going to first of all show you how to add two fractions. So let's suppose we want to add a half plus 3/4. So when you're adding fractions, the downstairs has to be the same. So, the proper word for the downstairs is the denominator, but it's less confusing if you call it the downstairs. So before you add two fractions, the two downstairses, if you like, have to be the same. In other words, we have to make a common denominator. So sometimes it's easy to make a common denominator. The answer jumps out at you. So for example, in this one, I can rewrite the 1/2 as 2/4. And now the downstairs is the same in both fractions. It's a common denominator. And once the downstairs is the same, I can add the upstairs. So this would be 5/4, or 1/4. So that's how you add two fractions. Make sure you have a common denominator before you try anything. Now, I shouldn't really be telling you this, but I will, and I'm going to write it in red. Sometimes it's very tempting to just randomly start adding things and to add the upstairs and the downstairs. You can't do this. So when you're adding fractions, you need to make sure you have a common denominator first. That's the rule for adding. Things are a bit different when it comes to multiplying. So let's suppose we want to multiply 2⅓ by 2/7. So the first thing to do is to write the fractions in the simplest possible forms. So the 2⅓ can be written as 7/3, 2 times 3 plus 1, 7/3 times 2/7. Now, when it comes to multiplying, you multiply the upstairs and the downstairs. That's fine and well to do for multiplication. So this would be 7 times 2/3 times 7. So 14/21, which is 1/3, because 7 divides into the top and the bottom. So the answer here is 1/3. Let's suppose we want to divide two fractions. So let's suppose I have 2⅓ and I want to divide it by 5/2. Well, the first step, as before, is to write all the fractions in the simplest possible way. So the 2 1/3 again becomes 7/3. And the rule for division, you take your fraction and you flip it around. So, and you multiply. So dividing is the same as flipping around and multiplying. And now I multiply the upstairs and the downstairs. So this is 14/15. And that's my final answer. So you can kind of see a pattern here. The multiplication and the division, they come as a pair. In that, for multiplication, you just multiply the upstairs and the downstairs. The division, there's one extra step. There's the flipping, and then multiply the upstairs and the downstairs. But in a way, these two operations are a pair. They come in a pair because the basic procedure is the same. You multiply upstairs and downstairs. So if multiplication and division are a pair, then addition and subtraction are a pair. So the same rule applies to addition and to subtraction. And that is the common denominator. So if we look at 1/2 minus 1/3, just as an example, what I need to do is I need to take a common denominator. And again, sometimes the common denominator jumps out at you and it's obvious. Sometimes it's not so obvious. Here I'd suggest it is obvious, and it's a 1/6. So the 1/2 can be written as 3 over 6, and the 1/3 can be written as 2 over 6. And now that the denominators are the same, I can subtract the upstairs. So this is 3 over 6 minus 2 over 6, which is 1 over 6. And that's my final answer. So I said sometimes it's obvious what the common denominator is. Sometimes it's not so obvious. But there's, again, a rule, a recipe, a procedure for working out what the common denominator is in a case like this. So let me show you, for example, if I want to do 2 1/3 minus 1 1/4. Well, I'd first of all write the fractions in the simplest possible way. So 3 times 2 plus 1 will be 7 over 3. And then 4 times 1 plus 1 will be 5 over 3. 5 over 4 even. So if it's not obvious what the common denominator is here, well, a guarantee is that the common denominator will always be the product of the two individual denominators. So 3 times 4 is 12. But now that I've changed the downstairs, I have to change the upstairs. And how you change the upstairs is a kind of cross multiplication. So I have the 7 and I have the 5 from before. And now I would cross multiply by the other denominator. So the 7 gets crossed with the 4. And the 5 gets crossed with the 3. And now I've made a common denominator. It's 12. So 28 over 12 minus 15 over 12. And this is 13 over 12. So that's the answer here. Multiply the individual denominators. And you cross multiply to find the new numerators of the upstairs. So one last example where we combine a few of these different steps. So let's suppose I want to do 2 1/3 minus 1 1/4 divided by 1 over 6. I use the precedence rules, bird mass. So I need to do the brackets first. But happily, the thing that I just highlighted in yellow, that's the sum that I just did, 13 over 12. Divided by 1 over 6. And now I use the rule that when I am dividing, it's the same as multiplying, but with the fraction flipped around. And I can simplify this. So 6 goes into itself once and 6 goes into 12 twice. So this will be 13 over 2. And that's that. So have a lovely day with your fractions.